Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome all to the session on water-related trade-offs in the energy transition. We keep the door open such that people can walk in and they're not scared when you look at them. So don't look nice at them if they're a little bit late. Welcome. It's about the energy transition, but let's start with a parallel. Did you see in the news how many data centers builders are currently challenged by local communities if it concerns water? Did you see that? Oh yeah, over there they are. Yeah. Well, increasingly people do not take it for granted that their scarce water is going to be used by big companies. So increasingly these companies start investing in water compensation, and they do that for a reason, because they want to be more sustainable with water, but also because they're pushed by public opinion. Now let's move to the topic of today, and that's about energy, about the energy sector, because that's what we're going to talk about. It's about thirsty energy today. That's thirsty energy. That's the name of a report which has been published by the World Bank some 8 years ago. So with the session, we're really going to connect the Water Week's topic, which is water for climate action. So we're going to connect water with climate mitigation. So it's about fossil fuels. It's about renewable energy sources. So it's about how we can organize the energy transition in such a way that we do not end up in the situation the data centers are currently in. So there's a couple of aims for the session today. I'll show them on the screen. Well, basically, we'd like you to get a better understanding of the connect between water and energy, the water-energy nexus, and its implications for climate action. We'd like to learn you from some practical examples, so we're going to share 2 of those. And it'd be nice if we can also have some share some community-based approaches. We can learn from that. And what we like you to be is to be inspired also to drive a positive impact based on what you hear today and what you bring also to the panel later on. So the program looks like this, but before we gonna look at the program, it might be good to briefly introduce who I am. My name is Lennart Sylvis, and well, I'll be the host and moderator for this 90-minute session. So I'm a water professional for some 25 years now, and I'm with Haskoning, which is a globally engineering consultant. And my role within the company really focuses on strategic partnership, on client engagement with industries and corporates. So I focus on water and climate, but also make the connect to, let's say, broader sustainability topics. Might be nice to mention as well that I'm also setting up a fund from our company. And I'm a little bit proud of that, but still got to give it shape. Every year we will donate 12.5% of our profits to research. And that's research on water and on climate resilience. So that's really independent from our business. Its aim is to have societal impact. So that's something to look forward to. But today, of course, we'll focus on water in the energy transition. Let's take a look at the program. So what we got for you is 3 presentations here behind this microphone. One is a presentation, well, more in depth on the topic, what's the connect between water and energy, and 2 case presentations, one presented by Joshua Wong, who's with EPICA. He'll explain later on what EPICA exactly is, and the other case will be presented by Christine Colvin, who is with WWF. Well, the remaining time, which is 1 hour, we'll spend with look at 6 panelists. We got 6 panelists, and we got you as the audience. So you'll be able to share your opinion as well. So I'm a little bit curious who is participating, who is in the room. Let's take a look. We got people here, and we got people online as well. But this question I'll ask in the room. So who would say, I am a water professional? Please raise your hand if you say I'm a water professional. Let's see who's, okay. No, I think some 60%, 70. Who would say I am an energy professional? There's one there. Is there one? Yeah, two? You're not sure. Okay, well I got a third question, so maybe that's one. And who is an energized professional? Some 50, 60, 70. Okay, yeah, that's one more there. No, so okay, and I think that's what we need. We need the energy to make things happen. So thank you. Before we go to the other topic, to the presenters, some practicalities. Well, of course, I'll do my best and utmost to interact with you, the audience, but also with the online audience. And for that, Gert-Jan Maasdam is sitting there behind the desk. He's listening in the chat of the online audience. So every now and then I look at him, and if there's a question he thinks, well, that's challenging Leonard and the panel, he's going to ask it. So he also has a microphone and can interrupt. But of course, you can raise your hand, and if you got a question, please wait till the mic is there, because of the online audience, so that they can hear you as well. All right, I hope all is clear. Let's start with the first presentation, and that's a presentation by Eva IJzermans, and she's a colleague at Haskoning, and she is a consultant in water strategy, has an experience and background in water management, and also has been involved in the energy transition in different projects. Well, as such, we've invited her to give an introduction to the topic of today. Eva, please.
Thank you very much. I want to add to that introduction that I'm also a bit energetic, so I'm used to running around on stage, but today I'll try to keep focused on the mic. So if you can hear me, just shout out and I'll make sure to move back. First of all, thank you all for being here. We today want to discuss that water and energy have always been intertwined. Well, actually, most of the Netherlands would be underwater if it weren't for energy. And the relationship actually has been very strong in the past decades. Back in the day, in the 17th century, we used windmills, wind power, to make sure that we could actually dry up large parts of our country. As the energy sources changed and we developed with it, we had steam engines powered by fuel and by coal to make sure that our system was dry. And when we look in the future, we see that the relationship also changes. So where energy was there to help us manage our water, we can now actually use water to manage our energy system, as we see different ways to store energy with the use of water. So what if we look at the big picture? As we know, our climate has been changing, and sometimes also, well, partially also because we have been producing energy in certain ways. But we also see this accelerate. And we see new balances that we have to learn to understand. We see a new environment, sometimes positive because we can have wine racks in Scandinavia and we have French summers in the Netherlands. But we also see large parts of the world actually desertify. We see different types of plagues coming. We see crops dry out or flood, and we see a lot of challenges. Next to that, we see the energy demand growing as digitalization is becoming such an important part of our life. So where we are used to looking at the basic sources that we need in life, like water and food, we actually see that energy is also becoming part of a human right. And in a lot of places in the world, yeah, a human right so that you can be a part of the world of today. Especially when we look to the future, looking at this development, economic growth, and everything that we need to do to make sure that we can do what we want to do, our energy demand is growing, and it's really growing fast. Trade-offs, as we call them, will not only be about water. We can see biodiversity going down because we use certain energy sources. We need resources to build certain things we need for this development. We have emissions and space, and all of these trade-offs are things that we consider when we think about the energy transition. What is interesting is that water and energy have a mutual dependence, because both are needed to develop, and both are needed sometimes to produce one and to manage the other. So when we look at this energy transition, even though we have to make a choice in if we want to go for a sustainable resource, or maybe a resource that we have said we don't want to use anymore, what we consider will have an impact on our water system, and not a little. So there are different trade-offs when we choose these different sources. For example, if you would take the car from here to Oslo, you could actually say you need about 30 liters of water if your car drives on solar and wind energy. Well, if we say, no, I want a gasoline car, that's what I'm used to, using crude oil and process that, you could say you need about 6,500. But actually, when you go to nuclear energy, what is often used because the CO2 is quite low that comes off of that, you go to about 20 times more. And this consideration, this difference in energy source and the trade-offs that we have to go through to make sure that we can have this energy transition is just very complex and very intertwined. However, the world needs water and the world needs energy. So how are you going to deal with these trade-offs? Are you going to go to an oil platform where you can use seawater to cool the system? You can actually use closed-loop cooling. So you need very little fresh water to make sure that you have an amount of energy. However, the trade-offs that you do have to have is you have emissions that are changing the world of today. Are you going for hydrogen, green hydrogen, where you can use solar power to make sure that you get this hydrogen, but in areas where there's very little water. So all of a sudden, local populations don't have enough water to do the things that they usually used to do. Or do you choose for a biofuel? So we have big crops which we can grow in areas where there's a lot of water, however, often can also cause stress on food. So where are these trade-offs that we have to make, and how do we want to look at this energy transition and how water plays an important role in that? This, of course, doesn't sound very positive, but what I want to make clear before we start in this session is that the relationship between water and energy is not something new. It's not something only of tomorrow. It is a relationship that has been very old. We've seen it in polders back in the day, and we see a lot of challenges when we go in the future. However, there are also a lot of opportunities. If we work together, look outside the columns, just water, just energy, we can actually make sure that you choose for options where you consider your water footprint, work on biodiversity, but also produce energy. It's important to realize that every energy source is in a local environment, and this environment has to also connect to the way that it's produced. So on that note, I want to make sure that everyone remembers that this transition will not only impact infrastructure, but also people, ecosystems, and communities. And that's why we're very happy to have this session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Any questions to Eva following what she said? Explanations you need? From the online audience, let me know if anything comes in.
From the online are about, and it came up in the opening session at 11 o'clock, breaking away from the silos. How do you make projects happen and investments happen if the benefits land in different pockets?
That's a very interesting question, and do you want to answer it? Give it a try.
Yes, definitely. Well, it is interesting. It's also interesting because it's brought up. We discussed it a lot already the past few days. It's a challenge that we see also with clients where we work with, where we want to look at this integrated approach. However, budgets are always allocated for one silo or the other. So it's something that we're trying to figure out together with different stakeholders, and that's why it's important that we have sessions like today where people come together and discuss, well, how can we work together and work over these boundaries?
Yeah, following my question, who was in the audience, there was 1.5 person at least in the room here who said, I'm from the energy sector. So there's a challenge there. To well, I can say to the audience, online audience as well, the one who asked the question, this topic, breaking down the silos, will also come back in the panel dialogue. So we'll get more in depth there. So one question there? No, you're not. Okay. Well, thanks, Eva. Thanks for your presentation, and we'll move to the second presentation, which is a case presentation. There we are. It's will be presented by Joshua Wong, and Joshua is the nature coordinator within IPICA, and IPICA is the Global Oil and Gas Association focusing on the environmental and social performance across the energy transition. He'll tell you more about that. Well, and from his role at IPICA, he supports the environment working group and also the water working group. So he's the right person to have a case presentation. Josh, please go ahead.
Yep, thanks Lennox and Ava for that introduction, and good afternoon everybody. It's great to be back in Stockholm again this year, and I'm excited to be presenting this case study for you, which I hope can continue to build upon the nice introduction from Lennox and Ava, and hopefully tee up the rest of the session quite nicely. So for those who are not familiar with IPICA, by the way, I'm Joshua Wong, and for those who are not familiar with IPICA, IPICA is the Global Oil and Gas Industry Association that's dedicated to advancing the environmental, social, and climate performance of the energy sector and its contribution to the energy transition within a context of sustainable development. IPICA was founded in 1974 at the request of UNEP, acting as the principal channel of communication between the oil and gas sector and the UN. And part of our role and responsibility as an industry association is to convene our members with stakeholders in order to integrate sustainability in the sector, as well as leveraging technical expertise within our membership in order to develop good practice guidance and promote knowledge sharing. So IPICA's global membership is comprised of 79 oil and gas companies, which collectively represents 64% of global oil and gas production around the world, operating in over 180 countries. And the example that I'll be presenting today comes from one of our members, Ecopetrol, which is the national oil company of Colombia, and they have been a member of IPICA since 2020. So on this slide, I've got a high-level overview of water use and impacts throughout the oil and gas value chain. As you work from left to right on the screen, you'll begin in the upstream oil and gas sector, which is the exploration and production, and then you'll move to the midstream transportation, and then to the right, you've got the downstream refining, chemicals, and distribution. I think the diagram builds quite nicely upon Ava's introduction on the interrelation between water and energy systems. Water is absolutely crucial, an absolutely crucial part of the energy production process, and the oil and gas sector is not an exception to this. As you can see in the diagram, throughout the oil and gas value chain, water is relied upon in various quantities and qualities, as well as having the potential to be impacted by business activities. So therefore, oil and gas companies have long recognized the importance of water and sound water management to their businesses. And within IPICA, in 2013, the Water Working Group was set up in recognition of the industry's needs to manage this resource responsibly. And so the example that I'll present today comes from the upstream value chain of oil and gas, and it ties into the upstream value chain of biofuels production, which, as we saw from Ava, can be quite water intensive. It's an example of produced water reuse, which can be seen in the third category of the top two boxes of this diagram. And for those who are not familiar with this term produced water, I'll just briefly clarify what that is. So produced water is water that is stored deep underground along with oil and gas deposits, and it's brought to the surface during the extraction of those oil and gas deposits. For each barrel of oil produced, you can have anywhere between 3 to 10 to 50 barrels of produced water generated as a byproduct, with various characteristics in terms of dissolved solids, salinities, and other properties depending on location and geology. And so because of this, historically produced water has been managed by the industry as a waste stream, typically disposed of underground. But given recent years, the increasing concerns of water scarcity and growing water demand, oil and gas companies have increasingly explored alternative management solutions to produce water from their operations. So this Ecopetrol case study is an example of such recent innovative thinking to address produced water management. In 2024, Ecopetrol and Frontera Energy collaborated on the SARA water treatment plant. Now, SARA is an abbreviation for the Spanish translation of Water Reuse System for Agricultural Use, but I'm not going to subject you to my Spanish today, so I'll continue to call it SARA, if that's okay. And this treatment facility is interesting. It uses reverse osmosis technology to purify the produced water coming from the nearby Kiefer and Rubiales oil fields. The treated water is cleaned to such an extent that it becomes usable for the irrigation of agricultural crops, specifically 3,000 hectares of oil palm trees. So I've got a few pictures on the slide here which hopefully can help us illustrate this process. Beginning in the bottom left, where you've got the reverse osmosis skids. So this is where high pressure is applied to the produced water, forcing it through a semi-permeable membrane which separates out the impurities and leaves behind the treated clean water that you can see in the top. Then that treated clean water is transported to the agricultural areas for irrigating the oil palm trees in the middle. And then eventually you get the fruits of the oil palms, from which palm oil is derived, and then biodiesel is then produced from that. So since its inauguration in late 2024, the SARA treatment plant has treated over 54 million barrels of produced water each day. 54 million barrels of produced water in total. And each day it treats between 200 to 250,000 barrels of produced water. By 2027, the treatment plant aims to double this current capacity to 500,000 barrels of produced water each day, and eventually in the long term reach its full nameplate capacity of treating 1 million barrels of produced water per day. But it is very much still a new project, so it's still learning and improving day on day and hoping to scale its productivity and positive impact. So I'll conclude this brief case study with a few final thoughts. The SARA treatment plant demonstrates an innovative solution addressing several challenges in the energy transition. Firstly, it promotes circular economy principles to answer the challenge of produced water management, whereas before this produced water might have been simply disposed of underground and essentially lost to the water cycle. SARA allows for the produced water to now play a much more important and valuable role. At the same time, this treated produced water substitutes for otherwise fresh water that would need to be withdrawn for crop irrigation, so SARA is directly helping to reduce the pressure on the water basin. And lastly, SARA contributes to the energy transition in that the biofuels generated from the oil palm can be regrown and replenished quickly, whilst also burning cleaner than traditional hydrocarbons with a lower carbon footprint. So I'll pause here. I hope this brief case study has helped give us a bit of an idea into how companies can remain water smart in the energy transition. And I think I'm just about on time. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Well, I got one question myself. To me, a new unit of water. So how many liters of water in a barrel? Do you know that? How many?
132.
132. Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
And I work in energy as well. So I wanted to ask you, when you're talking about the water is forced through a permeate membrane, so the water that passes goes to multiple uses. So what happened to the residue that leaves behind? So what are you planning to do a value extraction on that as well? Because I think there's a lot of a value extraction there.
Good question.
So yeah, correct. So the reverse osmosis process does produce brines, which is, again, concentrated waste material. I think globally there's different uses for that, but in this specific example, they will send it back to where the production well and then re-inject it underground, so it's not being exposed to the environment.
Okay. So this is specific to exploration and production?
It's relating to the EMP activities and the water that comes from that, yeah.
Thanks. Another question over there. Sir, please wait till the mic is there. The mic is with the lady. And are there any questions online as well, Gertjan?
Yeah.
We'll take one more, or we take one from you now, and then we get back to you when the microphone is there.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's fine.
Please, go ahead.
It's clear you're in the home of water. Also, the online audience is rather water focused and oriented. A personal question is: there are two transformations needed: the energy and the water. And the question is: should we, in the water sector, look at the energy transition as a threat for water, or an opportunity and a blessing? How do you see that?
That's a good question. Thanks for that. I think the energy transition shouldn't be seen as a threat. I think it's absolutely a necessary and imperative move in our energy system. Of course, as this whole session is centered around, there is water implications for that. So ensuring that you can understand what the trade-offs are and whether if we're saving carbon, are we adding more pressure on water? That's, of course, a calculation and a decision that needs to be taken. But I would not say we should be viewing it as a threat.
No. Okay. Thanks. The question, the mic is there.
Hi. Just a quick question. I mean, whenever we look, probably to give a background, I'm from Fluor Corporation. We are an engineering, procurement, and construction company. So we work in various sectors, including water. Now, obviously, when we always compare oil and gas, so I probably started my career as an oil and gas profession many years back, but then I moved over to the EPC for last about 20 years. So when we look at alternative forms of energy, we always ignore the fact that it requires a huge amount of water, number one. It requires a lot of energy to make the renewable energy, and at the end of it, it leaves a huge amount of residue also, which requires again energy to kind of bring it to a situation where we can handle it safely or dispose of or reuse it somewhere. So has any comparison been done of the energy requirement for these different sectors? Because always say, for example, we talk about solar, we talk about hydrogen, we talk about other things, whereas to produce hydrogen, you need huge amount of power. Okay, you get it from solar. But then equally, to bring the water to that level, you produce a huge volume of wastewater. Same is the question of lithium.
Could you bring it to a concrete question for him?
Yeah, the concrete question is, have you done any comparison of the energy required to total energy required to make the water usable?
So from an IPECA perspective, I would say, as far as I'm aware, we haven't done any kind of studies on that. But we are looking in our water working group to compare the water footprints of various energy pathways, comparing hydrocarbons to alternatives. So I think that kind of maybe answers a bit of your question. But
Yes.
in terms of looking at the energy required for each pathway, I'm sure there's been studies, but nothing that we have commissioned as IPECA.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. A last question over there, if that's okay, because we got to move to
Yep.
Christine.
So just very quickly, could you elaborate a little bit on the financial incentive, for example, for that project?
Okay, so I'll caveat this by saying that I'm presenting on behalf of this company. So to be honest, I'm not fully sure what the financial motivation is. Yeah.
That's okay. So maybe I'll pick it up later with the panel. They have a question about financial incentives.
Yeah, it's one of the three topics. One is on finance and investment. So, and I give a last opportunity over there. Who raises the hand?
Okay.
Who dares? The lady or the guy? The lady first? Okay, then it's lady, and then we move to Christine from WWF. This is over there. It's a huge auditorium, so the mic needs to travel a bit. And there it goes. be great if you could have a mic that you could throw, you know, those mics. Please.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk. My question is regarding the impact. I'm wondering if you can speak to the impact of SARA, like what proportion of the total produced water are projects like SARA, and how scalable would projects like this be? Like what would it take for the industry to be able to turn a much larger percentage of produced water into agricultural usage or other usages?
Thanks for the question. So I was doing some research ahead of this, and I think the stat that I've received so far is, at the moment, the treatment plant is dealing with about 15% of the total produced water from those operations. So of course, you can encourage that to increase and grow in that proportion, but at the same time, it's also a very expensive operation. So it's really to do with balancing the finances with the engineering capability, and it's a lot. Yeah, it's a very complicated picture, I would say.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm going to leave it here with the questions. So we go on to the next speaker, and when the panel is here, you've got more room for questions. So thanks, Josh, for your presentation. And I'm going to invite, thank you. I'm going to invite the next speaker, Christine Colvin. She's with WWF, World Wildlife Fund International, and she's the water policy lead. I think you joined in 22. That's what it says here. You have very international experience, Europe, Africa, and you have an example of energy from water in dams. So let's see what happens there. Please go ahead, Christine.
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all in this rather grand venue. And I'm going to talk about a hydropower example. So some very obvious and direct trade-offs when we're looking at dams for hydropower. But to the question that came earlier around looking at the water footprint of different energy options, I think that this case study really emphasizes that when we're talking about water impacts, we're not only talking about water. There's an awful lot more that goes into it when we're talking about living river systems. So the example that I want to talk about is the Sambor Dam, and I'm sorry that you probably can't see it that well on here, but there's the main stem of the Mekong River is presented in that inset map. And the lower two green dots were two major hydropower dams that were first proposed in the 1960s. So, I mean, this was a classic sort of large-scale engineering operation that was in the planning system for a very, very long time. And the picture behind it shows the river at this point. And Sambor, in fact, is a Khmer word. This is in Cambodia, and it's a Khmer word that means riches. And I think the riches of the river at this point are kind of hidden in plain sight, in that we're not just talking about river, we're obviously also talking about sediment, we're talking about fishes, fisheries, food for people, and the ecosystem that exists around that huge free-flowing section of the Mekong at that point. And the dams that were proposed, the Sambor Dam would have been 1.5 kilometers wide. It was planned for over 2,000 megawatts of energy, and with an estimated cost of around $5 billion US. And Cambodia is a very and certainly at this point in the sort of around 2015, 2016, when the decision was really coming to a crux, a very energy poor country with a very urgent and clear need for energy to support sustainable development. So there was a lot at stake in the decision around whether or not to have these two dams and a big hydropower center for Cambodia's energy. Now, I talked about some of the riches of the river. I think one of the things that's most interesting about this section of the Mekong is that it represents the largest, not just in freshwater fisheries, but the largest fish migration in terms of biomass on an annual basis. So there's a huge number of fish that are moving up and down the river. And that are really critical. This is a massive inland fishery, I think the 5th biggest in the world. And locally caught fish are the most important source of protein in local communities' diets as well. So it's a very, very critical resource beyond the water itself. The water itself is, of course, essential for agriculture, for fishing, for livelihoods in the area. But certainly the fisheries are critical. And another really important feature of the river at this point is the transport of sediment. And sediment going downstream, particularly to the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, which, of course, it needs a continual supply to maintain the level of the delta and to help protect against storm surges. Now, one of the big issues around this hydropower, as with many hydropower dams proposed at the moment, is that this could be, it's not just around the kind of nature-climate nexus trade-offs from a water perspective and from a carbon and mitigation perspective, but also from an adaptation perspective. And a lot of these really big dams present a clear example of maladaptation. Blocking up the river at this point would have starved the delta downstream of the essential sediment that maintains the land levels. And we've heard a lot about in the Netherlands, the example of water and being on a large delta as well, and energy very intertwined. So this would have been a disaster for downstream communities in Vietnam, and also would have impacted the ability for rice production and food security in the region as well. So all in all, there were a lot of things stacking up against hydropower. And WWF was very involved in a lot of these aspects, and particularly the inland fishery. But something that we had been working really hard on the Mekong, as well as in some other large rivers in the world, including the Amazon and the Indus, are river dolphins. Some of you might not know that there are freshwater species of dolphins as well, river dolphins. Here's one being particularly cheeky, blowing a squirt of water at everybody. But the dolphin population on the Mekong was a success story that after 15 years of work with scientists, with other NGOs, including WWF and local communities, we for the first time had seen a slight recovery in this population of river dolphins. And we knew that the large dam construction would again be a disaster for this population that moves up and down the Mekong. So the costs and benefits were really starting to stack up against hydropower. And looking at the different trade-offs, it was clear that it wasn't just in terms of the direct costs, and the direct costs in terms of money, in terms of the flooded area. It would have required the biggest displacement of local communities in Cambodian history for any engineering project as well. And the benefits were starting to look rather slender in comparison to the costs when we did a very detailed analysis. But coming up with all the problems against one energy solution doesn't really solve the problem. So we also wanted to present an alternative that we felt the trade-offs tilted a better decision towards solar rather than Samba. And we produced this report at a time when the key decisions were still being made around whether to proceed with the large-scale hydropower, whether to invest in that. And at the time, the cost of hydropower was still half that of solar. But it was really the indirect costs that helped to influence the government of the day to put a moratorium on the dam construction until 2030 and to start investing in solar. There's some really interesting material that sort of summarizes all the costs and benefits and how the decisions were taken at the time. Now, of course, the price of solar has come down even further. We've already seen 400 megawatts installed in Cambodia in the last 7 years at a cheaper than anticipated cost, which is kind of the opposite to hydropower, where these big engineering projects typically tend to overrun and exceed the original projected costs. There are lots of other benefits as well, much more local employment, fewer transmission losses through the grid, and a much faster route to market and to energy provision from the installation of solar. Plus, it can be managed, installed, and run at multiple different scales. So local communities, municipal governments, city scale, and national scale, whereas the hydropower is always consigned to large-scale energy provision as well as large-scale disruption. So all in all, I think this has been one of the, sadly, relatively few success stories where we've seen a key decision influenced at the right time, even though there was still more uncertainty to come, particularly in the relative costs of the energy. But the indirect costs of building those 2 huge dams, I think, would have been substantial for the local communities, not just in Cambodia, but also in the downstream states as well. And so this is an example where the trade-offs really were taken into account by the decision makers, and I hope a better decision was reached. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Christine. Thanks. The water trade-offs were taken into account. Any questions to Christine? If so, the mic, could the mic go up there? Do you have questions as well from the audience? One? Yeah, one. Okay.
Great. Thanks. Very interesting. Matthew McCartney from International Water Management Institute. Very interesting presentation, and I think you laid out the case very clearly. The International Hydropower Association always argues these days for storage and the fact that you need to store energy, and that is why you need reservoirs in order to balance out the solar and the wind, etc., the other renewables. So I just wondered, has that been taken into account within this analysis that's been done? Because I think if that was there as well, then the case would be even more convincing. But anyway, thank you very much. Very interesting case.
Thanks, and that's a great question. In fact, another piece of analysis, because I was so limited in time by our dear facilitators, but in fact we did an analysis of looking at a system-wide storage and hydropower generation potential for the whole of the Mekong Basin. And what was shown in that is that it is possible to build a reasonable amount of storage in many of the tributaries feeding in and keeping dams off the main stem. And that results in far fewer costs and indirect costs to the river, to biodiversity, and to communities. So I think there is a case to be made for some sustainably planned and well-managed storage on the tributaries. Also, you know, in terms of store and pump, looking at innovative infrastructure, for instance, old mines for water storage as well. There's a lot of already engineered infrastructure that can be used. We don't necessarily need to build storage directly on free-flowing rivers. Thanks.
Thanks. Gert-Jan, do you have another question from the online audience? You had one.
I do. I just got updated. We have almost 100 online participants. I'm not bombed yet by questions and comments, so I hereby ask them, please do so. But we got one quite relevant one on your story of hope, and this is about not just the energy and water connection, but also bringing food and climate into the equation. And the question is, from a macro perspective, if you plan investments and projects, how do you analyze these complex relationships between those four in order to make the right decisions and right investments? How to do that? How did you do that in this case in Mekong?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's one that we're continually learning how to answer better, because there are always hidden dimensions. You know, when we think about 20 years ago when we were doing environmental impact assessments, and they look quite rudimentary compared to the complexities and interdependencies that we understand now. I mean, it's a big question, and it's a big answer, and I'm happy to follow up directly with the person who asked the question. But I think that the whole issue of the potential for maladaptation, and knowing that when we're planning, we have to plan for a very uncertain and a very different future. We are already overshooting the 1.5 goal for climate. At the moment, we are on a trajectory for 2.8. Degrees C of global heating, which is going to result in a very different hydrological cycle and very different biodiversity. So I think one of the key challenges now is around not only taking into account impacts for our current reality, but taking into account impacts for a fairly predictable future reality that we haven't yet experienced.
Thanks, Christine, for your presentation and answering these questions. So we'll move to the panel dialogue. So please stay on stage and choose one of the seats. I'd like to invite the 6 panelists. Please come on stage, and I'll introduce each of you. Oh, are you okay? Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Here.
I'll bring you some water. I guess that
Oh, I'm really fine.
that might be nice.
Okay.
Right, so we got 6 panelists, and 2 of them you've already seen, so I won't reintroduce them. That's Christine and Eva IJzermans, but we got another Eva, we'll ask her later. Welcome on stage. Welcome first, Mr. Julius Corrier. Mr. Corrier is the Principal Secretary of Water and Sanitation in Kenya. And he has quite an interesting background, not just having worked in water, but also having other roles as a principal secretary in, for example, for the Ministry of Health, Infrastructure, and also industrialization. So a lot of broad background. I'm thankful that you can be here. Sitting on the other side, Eva Schreuder. Yeah.
Should have moved seats.
Please wave to the audience also online. So she's a diplomat at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands. And she's currently the head of the water team, which is part of the Department of Inclusive Green Growth. That's Eva. Then Albert Janssen, he's sitting here. Yes, Albert, he's a principal advisor for circular economy at Shell. And at the same time, so he's worked a very long time on water. He's been a professor on water technologies. And he's also the chair of the water working group of IPICA. And Josh presented about IPICA, so they're closely working together. Welcome, Albert. And here, Bapon, do I pronounce it right? Yep, Bapon Fakrudin. He's from the Green Climate Fund, and there he's the water and climate lead. Later on, he might tell a little bit more about what GCF is doing. Well, what we've done for this panel dialogue is that we've prepared 3 statements, and in the US audience also invited to say yes or no, or in favor or against the statement, and we'll do that through the Mentimeters. As such, the online audience can participate as well. But before we go there, I have 4 questions to the panelists who haven't been on stage yet, and I'd like to start with Mr. Corrier. Kenya has plans to invest in green hydrogen, and from your role in the water department, so what's the biggest water-related challenge you see regarding this green hydrogen plans? Please talk in the mic. Yep.
It's on. Okay. Do I stand?
Yeah, maybe I'll just move it to you.
Oh, we stand. It's okay.
Or we stand if you like. Yeah.
So thank you so much for this opportunity to come before this audience and maybe share our experience. Yes, it is true. As a country, we are planning to diversify our energy sources, and one of them is through the nitrogen. However, I think this may be where the contradictions begin. The ministry responsible for energy is going ahead without getting to involve us in the water. And in the past, we've had investments that are looking at hydropower without looking at how the water can also be used for other uses, water, irrigation, and water for sanitation. So the theme of water-related trade-off in the energy transition, resonates with us in Kenya. And for us in Kenya, we say water is not just a sectoral issue, it is a foundation for our energy system. I think about 50% of our energy sources is through hydropower generation. Our food security is also hinged in the water sector and also the broader development trajectory where water is not just a right, but it is a commitment by government to ensure that all Kenyans have water. So we therefore view the energy transition as inseparable from water, food, and energy nexus. Green hydrogen, I think, as we all know, Kenya has a deliberate steps to position itself as a hub of green hydrogen in Africa. Our green hydrogen strategy roadmap outlines a pathway for hydrogen to contribute to our net zero ambitions, create jobs, and integrate Kenya into the global energy markets. But it also acknowledges a fundamental challenge that hydrogen production via electrolysis requires significant volumes of water. And why this is an issue for us is that at the moment we are water scarce. Nearly 80% of Kenya's land mass is arid and semi-arid. Water availability is a critical constraint. Producing 1 kilogram of hydrogen, we are told, requires about 9 liters of purified water. Modest at small scales, but significant at gigawatt levels. So our strategy will be to ensure that hydrogen is water smart, and emphasizes on one, leveraging non-conventional water sources such as desalination and treated wastewater, embedding efficient recycling into project design, and also locating hydrogen hubs in areas with lower water stress. I think when you look at the map of Kenya, there are some regions that are water sufficient, and then there are others which are not sufficient. Maybe by virtue that we have a lot of rains throughout the year. So that locationing, and then we have a seafront, and we have a lake for the fresh water. So when it comes to locationing, we'll be able to look at all those so as to leverage on the sources. Then strengthening integrated water governance so that hydrogen development does not compete with households and agriculture or ecosystems. So here again, we have a practical example where how we are trying to leverage on this, and we are looking at how we are not only planning, but we're also acting. We have a flagship project that we are now under development with the Green Climate Fund in the Energy for Water project. This program supports 70 water service providers to transition to low carbon operations by deploying about 39 megawatts of renewable energy and energy efficient technologies. Again, here we are looking at how to reduce the cost of availing water to the people. And once this is implemented, we believe we'll be avoiding about 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide over its life cycle, reducing operational costs for utilities, and that one translate benefits to the citizens, and then expanding access to water services for urban and peri-urban communities, strengthening resilience to droughts and floods, and creating jobs while advancing gender equality and inclusion. So I think from where we are, we are integrating water and energy. But again, we could do better by making sure that we have a lot of synergy between the responsible ministries. Thank you.
You're not betting on one energy, but also an energy mix. That's what I understood, and the relevance of the location you mentioned as well. So thanks for this introduction into the situation in Kenya. Eva Schreuder from the ministry. Well, we said Well, the Netherlands is also investing in green hydrogen, but also on importing green hydrogen. So it's produced somewhere else, and you bring it to the Netherlands. So we'd like to bring it there. So what do you see as the, let's say, the most important water-related challenge that you have if it comes to importing green hydrogen?
Yeah, thanks very much, Leonard. And yeah, I think for a long time, I think the Netherlands wants to be and has looking to be a front runner with regard to green hydrogen economy and also becoming the main port of green hydrogen into Western Europe. And this year we also organized, I think some of you were present, World Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam, where more than 120 countries were present. So we have this ambition to be this main port and to really also transition into a hydrogen economy. And we see that the interest is high, both in the public side and on the private side. But at the same time, and that was the discussion that we're having today, there are many issues around regulations, challenges, uptake, that still need to be worked out. So it's really work in progress. And I would like to mention a report, bringing it back to the water space, of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, illustrating again that water and energy transition are really interlinked, and that we must do much better, and that's what we're trying to do today, to take the water dimension into the investments that we do in the energy transition. As you mentioned, the Netherlands is active in developing green hydrogen production abroad. And we've already done a lot of research on what is a responsible way to do that. The Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency produced a report outlining various suggestions on what we should take into account. And I just want to highlight 2 points. And one, I think it was also already mentioned by Mr. Kaur, is all water and land-related risk of green hydrogen are highly local. So from the start, deciding on where to produce green hydrogen is something to take into consideration. And another thing is that, and it was also mentioned that whatever we do, it will increase water stress in the regions that we produce. And especially in the regions that are already facing water stress. And these competing demands for food security, for the households, I think that is something that, and that's the advantage of being here together, that we can only manage when there are strong cooperation between the public and the private sector, both from an importing countryside, but also, and more importantly, from a local level. And there I also see the role of the government. And as some of you know, Germany and the Netherlands, we have been working very closely in Namibia to, as a part of the European Global Gateway, develop a hydrogen sector in the city of Lüderitz in the southwestern part of Namibia. And this city, it will undergo a huge transformation if we continue to do that. And I think there, also the public sector and also what we do with our increasingly scarce ODA money can make a difference. Do we really support the local capacity to make decisions? Can we support in developing these principles on water allocation? Is it an inclusive process? Can we play a role in foster this collaboration? And I think there I see a responsibility also from our side to contribute to that. I think we will remain committed to work in a sustainable production of green hydrogen, but we are also very aware of the challenges and trade-offs that we will discuss today. So I'm also very keen to learn from the other speakers. Thanks.
Thanks, Eva. So you mentioned that risks are local, there's competing demands, and you mentioned the last point you made was related, let's say, supporting local capacity, and the other point you made was on also the need for public-private cooperation, and that's for me a nice bridge to introduce Albert Janssen from Shell and also from IPICA. Albert, well, Shell and other energy companies have also a key role to play in the energy transition. So what are you doing as a company or as a sector organization to integrate water into decision making of on energy investments?
Yeah, thanks, Leonard, for this excellent question. And just to build on what was mentioned by the previous speakers, in Shell we have a long history of studying the energy, water, food stress nexus. And because of growing population and prosperity, the need for energy and hence also the need for water will increase. That's a fact. At the same time, there's climate change, and we are unfortunately past the point of the 1.5 temperature increase. I agree with you. We're going beyond that. So the situation is quite urgent. It's clearly recognized that fresh water is a scarce resource. And like I said, if emerging economies follow historical patterns of development, the need for energy, food, and water will continue to increase. And to keep pace with this, the world needs to invest in all energy sources, and at the same time, we have to cut CO2 emissions. So it's a very, very complex challenge that we are facing. So there needs to be a step change in how we find and produce energy sources and do this in a more efficient way, become smarter about the way we deal with energy. We have to do it in a more efficient way. And hence in Shell, and that's to answer your question, you know, we advocate the energy transition, a step away from, for instance, coal. That's very, very rich in CO2 emissions. And so we are planning to grow our gas business, which is far less CO2 intensive, and also requires less water to produce the gas rather than coal or water, which has to be mined. So what does this mean for Shell, and what are we doing in this space? And like I said, we have been studying this for over a decade. We actually wrote scientific papers on this topic, from which it follows that there's different energy requirements for different pathways. Josh also alluded to that. We're going to continue this work in IPICA. What we've done more recently is actually together with Haskoning, we have assessed the water stewardship principles to make sure that we take the local context into account, as you mentioned. We have to understand what the local water needs are. So because water is a shared resource and we want to be good stewards of fresh water, right? So we have to understand what we're doing within the fence line, but also outside the fence line, and then come up with the right solutions. Mm-hmm. Just elaborating on the green hydrogen, as you know, we have the Holland Hydrogen 1 in the Netherlands, which is our second green hydrogen plant, which is under construction at the moment, a 1 billion investment, where we take wind energy from offshore wind and use that in the electrolysis process to make hydrogen. And we use saline water for that, so not fresh water, so there's no competition with onshore fresh water. Just to elaborate on the work that we did with Haskoning, so we have assessed the water stewardship principles, and they work for us. They are industry agnostic, so that's great. But then to hardwire that into the business, it has to be embedded in our management systems, and that's something we did 3 years ago. So now every project, every asset, every business has to do a water stewardship assessment in Shell to understand these risks. And if you do this assessment, it's not only about water, it's also about biodiversity, it's also about land use, local communities. So yeah, we have to develop that holistic view. From there, we brought it to IPICA. It has been adopted by IPICA membership companies, so it's now guidance by IPICA that we are hopeful that other oil and gas industries are embedding that in the same way as we did.
Okay, so you've integrated into your decision-making process. That's basically what you're saying. Thanks, Albert. Later on we get time for questions, but first let's introduce Bepen. Thanks for being here. You're with the Green Climate Fund. So how is GCF? Maybe explain a couple of words on GCF. I don't know whether everybody knows here online what it is about. How do you ensure that water resilience really embedded into the, let's say, the energy-related investments you do as GCF?
Right.
What lessons have you learned?
Thank you so much. So if anyone doesn't know about the Green Climate Fund, so we are one of the mandate entity for implementing the Paris Agreement under the UNFCCC. We have been established last 10 years. We are actually operating. So that is a green climate fund where actually the developed country need to support to the developing world. So that's what we provide support through a program as well as catalytical financing. The way the GCF works, so we provide a different financial instrument to creating the market opportunity, but then bringing also a 50-50 adaptation and mitigation opportunity. So that makes us quite unique in a sense that this is one organization who always need to ensure that a project that going to the market is looking at 50% adaptation and 50% mitigation. So now when you're coming to the mitigation side, obviously energy is actually thriving area, but also in the adaptation side, water is also a quite unique area. But also water has a quite other opportunity that mitigation could play as a mitigation as well as adaptation side of it. So if I just like to look on the interaction part of it, in the water space, we're looking at more on the renewable reuse of water, water efficiency, where it comes like a hydropower as well as a wastewater treatment plant, all sort of things. We look at also the risk-based decision-making, early warning system. We look at nature-based solution, integrated water resource management, as well as climate resilient sanitation. So it has some, you can see already the mitigation aspect. And in the energy sector, we try to look at that more on the energy access, renewable energy, market creation, as well as transitioning. So these are all actually covered. In GCF so far, I think we mobilized more than $8 billion into the energy area. And then overall, I think 109 projects covering to the energy. But then those are actually, many of them are actually mitigation, directly mitigation project, but there are actually 54 out of 109 are looking at cross-cutting, what you call. So where actually you see that a nexus approach between the water energy ecosystems or water energy agriculture, those are actually are quite embedded in together. Because as you can see in the water space, if you look at on generally, 4% of global energy actually we absorb into the water sector. And similarly, on the energy side, it's actually quite dependent also with the water. And you maybe saw that actually just recent, maybe 2023 event with the drought, global drought, how actually the hydropower actually are less efficient to generating their energy market. So that is also one of the idea. That the unique value proposition that we bring here to providing, as I said in the opening panel, that we are actually a highly risk taker, so that actually we can take any kind of risk which is other DFIs or MDB cannot take. But at the same time, we are actually financially agnostic. So that means actually there's no such kind of binding rules for the financial instrument to customize for the client or the country's needs. So it could be more fit for purpose financing. If you want to create a project that is bankable, and if you need a concessionality, we can actually create those kind of concessionality using a different financial instrument. So we can use a highly concessional loan, we can use the equity, we can use the guarantor, we can use the first loss, or we can also use the insurance and as well as grant, obviously, to create a bankable programming. So that's how actually GCF operate. And in the some of the recent projects, if you look at actually where we created those market to access the energy, especially in the Africa, with the gridded energy networking, and we provided those kind of concessionality where actually GCF takes the first loss guarantor, or actually provide equity finance, or you can also provide a sort of guarantee to the local banks, so that actually they could easily actually deploy the business and create a bankable programming. So I think that's basically from our side.
Yeah, thanks for elaborating on that. Before we jump to the first question to you as an audience, are there any asks or questions to the panelists that have just given an introduction, or is there maybe one from the online audience, Gert-Jan?
No, the online audience is drying out a little bit, to use the wording.
So keep asking them to ask questions. Action. All right, then we go to the first mentee. So we'd like asking you to participate in that. There's 3 topics. So the first topic is on resilience and climate adaptation. You can see the question hopefully soon on the screen. Because now I got a different screen here behind me. Oh, there is it. I believe energy systems can only be truly resilient by integrating water stewardship into their design. And you can answer yes or no. And it's coming up, I hope. And if it doesn't work, we just go on. So why this topic? Because, of course, climate change is intensifying water scarcity. You see the code, so you can log in and at Menti and answer the question. So climate change is really intensifying, of course, water scarcity, variability of rainfall as well. So what we're going to discuss now is really focusing on how energy systems can adapt to changing water availabilities and adapt to extreme weather. So 26 players already. This looks very funny. I haven't seen it like this. Okay, this is kind of surprising. Really interesting. But do we have an answer or no? Let's just see. Let's maybe then first move before we see the answer. Christine, maybe I can involve you in this topic. Oh, you're still working on it. All right, on the answer. But I know WWF has, let's say, plenty of examples with water stewardship actions, collective actions to on water compensation, for example. So, what are the most important challenges you really face with water stewardship implementation?
Yeah, I think that. Sorry, hope you can hear me. I think to remember that water stewardship inherently takes things beyond direct operational control, and that can be very difficult for businesses to implement. The kind of highest objective of water stewardship is really to engage beyond the factory fence or beyond the farm fence, and participate in collective action for the kind of global good, and to improve the condition of the commons, particularly obviously for water resources. And that's a huge challenge. So finding the right partners to do that in the right places, in the right catchments, and in places that are really yielding results, so headwater areas, aquifer recharge zones, areas that kind of punch bigger than their weight in terms of the water resilience and climate resilience that they yield in the long term. I think that even working upstream and downstream for companies within their supply chains and towards their customers is something that's quite challenging, but definitely taking that step to find the right partners in the right places, and to make sure that you can look after the global commons as well. And this is where I have to give a quick punt, because I have the opportunity for a session on the Freshwater Challenge, which tackles exactly that. At 4 o'clock on this level, in the other one, A4, we're talking about the Freshwater Challenge, which is bringing companies, countries, lots of NGO supporters as well, and local communities together to achieve freshwater ecosystem restoration and protection at scale. And that's kind of the cherry on top of water stewardship and implementing that from an operational base.
Yeah. Thanks. I'd like to ask a question to Eva IJzermans, who's also involved in water stewardship actions. So, you build on what Christine just said, because you've been working with companies on water compensation, and what challenges do you experience from what you've worked on?
Well, it's actually funny to say, because we are really noticing an increased interest in water stewardship. So with a lot of different corporates that I think also influence each other or motivate each other to become part of this water stewardship program. What we try to explain to them, or what often helps, is to help them understand, what does it cost if you don't have water? So instead of having to make a business case where in a lot of places in the world, water is not that expensive or as expensive as, for example, energy, sometimes it feels like that this business case doesn't work. However, if you look at how much it costs for your system to be slowed down because you can't cool anymore, it often is actually quite expensive. And then your business case becomes far more interesting. It is very true that joint action, so if people work together and these companies come together, they have a far well, their dollar or their euro goes far further because they don't have this double overhead costs. And luckily we are seeing multinationals here and there opening their doors to each other, and instead of saying, okay, you are well, taking my consumers away from me, they say, okay, let's together make sure that we can actually keep producing, which is a nice change.
Thanks. Maybe I can ask a question to you, Mr. Corrier, because if you look at Europe, for example, then there's regulation like the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So it kind of encourages, well, a bit more than that, companies to comply with, let's say, at least disclose their part of the sustainability, also their water use and their impact on the water systems. So that's European regulation, and Europe is challenging itself with that, and they're also, a bit struggling with regulation, to be honest. But how are you, from your ministry, encouraging industries or private sector to work on their water footprint?
Thank you. I think for the case of Kenya, we are not as advanced as is in Europe, where corporates have self-regulating provisions. With us, as a Ministry of Water, we have Water Resources Authority. This is a regulator that ensures there is responsible use of water, no pollution, and we've started also as a way of encouraging corporates to recycle water, so that if you are a large corporate, we work with you to now show how you're going to use the water, recycle, and the circular economy. We also have Water Services Regulatory Authority. This is an agency of our ministry that is looking at how the service provision for the last mile to the citizen is regulated. And that way, we also are very keen to make sure that water is responsibly used and that there are no unnecessary wastes. But in terms of self-regulation, it is not yet there. Some industries are trying, like there is an association of manufacturers that are trying, but it's not really taken a lot of root in the country.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for answering that question. I'd like to go to the second statement, which is about cooperation. It's about breaking silos. It was already asked by one of the online participants, and it was also a topic in the plenary opening. So the question is pretty straightforward. It's a simple question, but just to make sure and see whether you're still answering. So we are at a water conference now. You could answer, I have attended an energy conference at least once. Yes, I have. Or no, I haven't. Just answer it. So it's going to be about silos now. And I'd like to start this round of discussions with Eva Schreuder. Yeah, what about you as a water director? I mean, you're the team lead of water. That's the way you I introduced you. But on so I could ask you the question: did you attend any energy conference? But maybe that's not. We go a step further, more serious note. What experience do you want to share if it's about working across silos within your ministry, and maybe beyond?
Thanks. I think I have not attended an energy conference, but I have attended several COP, so climate change conferences, as a climate finance negotiator for the EU. So I am, and I think all of us should step outside of these silos as much as we can. Sometimes you have the privilege to have a career that you can step into different roles and perspective to look at that, and sometimes you need to force yourself. And I think from our ministry, and I just keep it to us, so you introduced me as working for the Inclusive Green Growth Department. I mean, encompassing all inclusive green growth. It's hard, it's very difficult actually to reconcile all these well, abbreviations, I should say. But what we really try to do from a ministry perspective, and increasingly so, in that whatever we do, at least in the discussions we have in the teams when developing programs, is that we really look at how we really, in the work we do, look at how we merge whatever we do on climate change, what we do on ecosystem degradation, water scarcity, food security, how we bring that together in what we do, because we believe the programs that we will develop afterwards will yield better results. And there's still much also for us to do better to break outside of these silos, but we're making a genuine intent because we see that it works. Sometimes we even develop programs looking at water and energy for food, for example, in the MENA region, together with some of our partners. But are we there yet? No, because every bureaucracy also has its difficulties, budget lines that sometimes hamper these types of cooperation. But yeah, we're making an effort, and even our embassies on the ground, maybe colleagues are listening, they sometimes do a much better job than we do, because at the local level, I mentioned it before, things come together in a better way than if we do it from our headquarters in The Hague or wherever we are. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Most people say, by the way, that they haven't attended an energy conference at least once. So that's more than half of the people. And I assume a lot of people are not very digital, because if you got 100 online, then it's only like a small percentage answering the questions. Anyway, I've participated once myself in a green hydrogen conference, and it was quite interesting, because then I joined one of the sessions and started asking questions on water. Sorry, I couldn't help it. But I was, to be honest, they were a bit stumbled, but they were sitting like there was no good answer. It was quite surprising, to be honest. So I had a conversation afterwards, which was interesting. But so we should go there and ask the questions, or we'll be part of an energy panel and put some water energy in there. So that's also the challenge for you, I guess. Wepen, what about you? I mean, you're the water lead, and you said how water is kind of, you just explained us a little bit about that. But what do you experience yourself within your organization? Well, they made a water lead, but what opportunities do you get to really influence decision making?
Obviously, any water-related programming, I have quite strong influences, but also, as water doesn't have any boundaries, so we often work with other colleagues. So we normally look at into the 8 thematic area, so which is like in the mitigation side is more on energy, building, forestry, as well as infrastructure. Similarly, for the adaptation side is actually health, well-being, as well as livelihood, agriculture, again, the forestry and infrastructure. And often whatever the water project comes, these are doesn't come alone with the water. These are always a nexus, and each nexus could be multiple sector mixing. And so one way I influence when I design any project which is majority component is water, it comes to me. But if there is other colleagues who are actually designing an energy project, an ecosystem project, and for an example, health project, but if they need some water component, they always comes to us to getting guidance and support how that could be embedded and integrated. And that's the quite interesting part into the fund, that we are quite integrated and supporting each other to ensuring there is a cohesiveness as well as more harmonized and systematic and programmatic approach we are able to delivery for the most vulnerable communities.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for answering that. And looking at the time, I jumped to the third question. It's on finance and investment. So that's also close to you, Wepen, but I can also ask the others, I guess. So water-related risks are well included in energy investment strategy. That's a very positive statement, isn't it? So let's see what your answer is. And in the meantime, let me ask that question related to this to Albert, if that's okay with you, Albert. So are they well included, these water-related risks? And if you say yes or no, could you elaborate a bit on the how? How is water valued in a decision making?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. Water is a key enabler in our projects. This, I think, was pretty obvious from the presentation given by Josh or Pika. Without water, we cannot run our assets. In many instances, so we have to be aware of what these water risks are. And maybe I can give you just a few examples. When I joined Shell in 2003, I was just 3 weeks in the role. It was a summer where we had very high temperatures, And our Cologne refinery had issues with taking in cooling water because the water levels in the River Rhine were extremely low. In 2018, similar issues. We fixed the cooling water issues, but because of the low water levels, the barges were not able to transport the products, i.e. the gasoline and so on, from Cologne to the Netherlands. And our gas stations were going out of stock. So no doubt that water is a very important parameter that we have to assess carefully in doing projects. The way we go about this is that we have standards, management standards, that will require us to look into these water risks in a very holistic way. So it's not only about the technical risk that I just mentioned, but there's also many non-technical risks involved in water management. Biodiversity is one of them, right? We don't want to do a project where, which have a negative impact on biodiversity. So doing this in a very structured way, in a very transparent way, is the way we go about this. And water risks are just one of the risks on the risk register. Coming back to CSRD, we were on the hook this year to report out over our performance last year in 2024. I was the section lead to write the chapter on water risks. And we came to the conclusion that water is a material topic to Shell. Mm-hmm. And because it's a material topic, we have to assess these water risks in the right way. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. Would anyone like to add? Yeah?
I need to go, but I would like to note what's on the screen.
They are not, huh? They're not. Yeah.
Just
yeah.
important.
So people in the room say no, it's not well included in energy investment strategy. Anyone who said no would like to underline that with a statement or an example? Or are the no's all online? No, there's one here, Petra. Please go ahead. Oh, the microphone is coming.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not sure about that. It's just my impression because this is not the field I work in. I work on nature-based solutions, coastal sciences. So my impression is that, yes, probably they are very much included if it's water-related risks, so the risk for the companies. But I wonder, and maybe it is so, then I'm happy if you explain a bit that, if it's also about how the companies are actually affecting the water and these risks, if they are actually also included. I don't know.
Yeah. Who could answer that? Would you like to answer that, Pijpen?
Yeah, I mean, this is clear because if you look at the finance of these two sectors, so if you go to the energy sector, you see the private sector is quite enthusiastic to invest because people use energy, they pay money. But if you ask a private sector to invest in the water, they will be actually very hesitant to come. So that gives you the answer. And then when people who are actually investing in energy, even the water is actually playing, on the back end, they are not actually considering that as a forefront because they don't think that they will be run out if they don't actually consider the water. So that's where actually it comes that need to have a really more integrated approach. If you look at it on the gridded energy, we can also talk about the gridded water supply. Both are actually same principle, you're just changing energy to water. But because one has a high risk and one has a low risk, and that's why the appetite for the investment is quite high in the energy sector, less in the water sector. I think that's need to have a balance, the energy people who are actually in the market. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Already one panelist has left, and this is one to the end of the session. One last question, and then I got to close the panel. The question is up there.
Left.
Up there, yeah. Maybe shout it, and I can repeat it.
She's seen another question.
What you're mentioning now, it's not new. It was already the case 25 years ago. So what has been done in between to make sure that people are willing to invest in water and not just now because it's interesting for the money to invest in energy? What are you going to do to change that?
And that's a question to Pijpen who answered the question, is it? Yeah.
I mean, that's the reason actually that we say that it's only just one fund in the market who provide those kind of, highly concessionality or flexible financing to ensure that actually how can actually bring back those kind of risks that are in the market, because often the asset belongs to the public and it's actually quite aged and vulnerable, and that's why the private sector doesn't interested to invest there, because there's a less revenue generation opportunity. And there are often actually people thinks water as a common goods, because we don't actually think water as an asset class. If we start thinking about by ourselves water as an asset class, then there will be actually changing of the behavior and then the payment of the culture of water use as well as wastewater use. In the most of the developing world, nobody actually pay even for the wastewater reuse. So
yes, I know that, and that's the reason asking what are you going to do to change that?
Yeah, that's
as Green Climate Fund, how are you going to improve the situation?
Yeah, that's what I said, that we provide those kind of concessionality so that actually it could be bankable, which is actually you don't see an opportunity. So we can actually create a concession up to 0% with a 40 years of tenure, so that you can actually create those kind of a bankable project, which you will not be able to get with the DFIs or MDBs or even a local national bank. They will not provide those kind of concessionality.
Water related.
To de-risk the market.
I think it doesn't fully answer your question. That's what I can see at your face. Okay, one last statement, please. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think I like the question, and our experience in the case of Kenya is that water investments, private sector don't look at them. We are currently looking at how we can use PPP, private-public partnership, to do water projects. And first of all, when it comes to the huge infrastructure, that is the dams, they don't even want to look at it because the viability gap is so high. And them being profit-oriented, they are not looking at that. And this is where maybe as a country what we did was came up with a climate adaptation financing plan for the water sector, where we can now start leveraging on concession blended financing to make it attractive. We've even broken down the value chain. There is the bulk water storage, then there is the treatment, then the transmission, and the last mile service provision. With that, you find investors are willing to look at the water treatment, they're looking at transmission, and they're also looking at the last mile because the risks, commercial risks there are lower, and they're able to recoup their investment. So yet when you look at climate funds, have really gone into the energy because the private sector, the profit margins are better there, and that's why you find water has been lagging behind. But I think it is good that we have GCF here, they have had, so that we can be more deliberate in how we package water projects in a manner that is able to attract the private sector.
That's a very interesting example, Mr. Korea. Thank you. I got to close down this dialogue, so I'm going to summarize very brief. So we talked about, no questions anymore, Gert-Jan.
It's not a question.
About the importance of water, about, of course, in the energy transition, we need more energy and more energy and more water and more water. We said it's not one size fits all. If it's about water solutions, the location depends a lot. Energy production also comes in many shapes. Well, I think there was a plea also to keep an energy mix for that. We touched on green hydrogen. We answered 2 questions, and I think the last question was the most interesting one. Then the audience came some critical questions, and I think the conclusion could be that on that topic, on how water-related risk could be incorporated into decision making, I think that would be the topic of a session in which we go more in depth. Is that a promise? We can do that in a next time, and we can also answer some more questions for those panelists who can stay maybe down here. For now, I would like to thank all the panelists, also Josh for presenting as well, and I hope you've had some insight and we made up the promise. So thank you, and thank you, Gert-Jan. Thanks, Lepen.